Come on. I got this, I got this. Jump, jump.
Hey there, I'm Balrog and, well, I'm a game reviewer, and as the title states, I'm here to let you know if a game's good or not. Video games have always been a huge part of my life, not just because they're a fun hobby, but because they take me on adventures I sure as hell couldn't do in the real world. Well, most of them. So I decided to make my job to tell people about the good, bad, and really bad games in the world, and get gamers more educated about video games as a whole. And it was from that day forth that I knew. It was no longer just about playing games, but rather, the adventure of my wildest dreams.
Alright, I'm gonna go now. Ow.
BNGR. So when a game's being made, no matter what the genre is, there's usually some conventions that are supposed to be followed. Fighting games are supposed to have movesets and glorious combos you're supposed to pull off. RPGs usually revolve around getting skills and following a storyline, and of course, level grinding. And puzzle games, well, it seems everyone likes playing Bejeweled clones these days that may or may not be infesting my Facebook. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes a game comes along and throws almost all of the conventions of that genre out the window. Sometimes they're revolutionary, sometimes they're good but have a lot of major flaws in them. But more often than not, the game sucks. Because there's good reason why these conventions are used in the first place. They work.
And that's what brings us to today's game. A boy and his blob, troubles in Blobablonia. Alright, where's Wikipedia? Blobalonia for the NES. That hit my foot. Now despite the weird name, this game was actually considered revolutionary back in the 80s, and a lot of conventions came out of it that are still used today. But over 20 years later, is it as good as everyone says it is? Well, I'll just tell you right now. No!
So this game was made by a man named David Crane, famous for games such as Pitfall, Night Trap, and, Home Improvement. A true pioneer. After co-founding Activision back in the early 80s, he decided to leave and open up Absolute Entertainment, because apparently his company decided to throw out creativity for making tons of money. And by the looks of it, seems they haven't changed all that much. And Absolute's first game, as well as Crane's first NES developed game, was none other than A Boy and His Blob. Now before I even talk about the game, the problems have already started. Believe it or not, the development for Atari games was a lot different than NES games. Atari games were usually fast to make, easy to execute, and didn't require a huge staff to make. But NES games required dedicated teams and high levels of polish. I mean, developers could only do so much with this, rather than this. Well, unfortunately, Crane took the same approach as he did with the Atari games, and wow, does it show! Unlike most NES games with 6 to 8 month development cycles, A Boy and His Blob was slapped together in 6 weeks and rushed off to trade shows where Crane debugged it at nights in his hotel. So as you could guess, the result was a very rough product.
But hey, who knows? This is the guy who made freaking Pitfall. I love that game. I have it on my iPod. So if this guy can make genre-defining games on the Atari, the gameplay's gotta be good then at least. Right? Well, I'll start from the beginning.
So the game's premise is simple. The planet of Blobalonia has been overtaken by an evil emperor. That makes everyone eat tons of candy.
What horrible vampire.
So it's up to a random boy on Earth and his blobular companion to find buried treasure in caverns to pay for some vitamins at a drugstore, and then kill the Emperor with said vitamins. I don't know what's crazier, the fact he can't just use his allowance, or the fact he's gonna go buy vitamins at a CVS with buried treasure he found under a subway. I can't. Anyway, this is where the game gets really interesting. In order to progress through the game, you have to feed this blob different jelly beans. That's right, jelly beans make the blob change form. They even gave each one a name to help you remember what they do. Punch jelly beans make a hole in the ground, licorice jelly beans help make ladders, ketchup jelly beans respond to blob, okay, that one makes no sense. And it's really fun to experiment with the different flavors. Just be sure to write down what each one does and you'll be fine.
But after having my enjoyment with the blob, I got stuck in the first 5 minutes of the game. I'm not gonna lie, when I first started playing this game, I thought my copy was broken, which is saying a lot because it was the virtual console one. There were no enemies, no objects, just a straight line in the middle of a city. But little did I know, and after checking on GameFAQs, the answer was underground. Who knew?
You see, all the progression you make in this game is through experimenting. In this first puzzle, you go to the subway, use the punch bean to make a hole, and then a licorice bean to get to the treasure. Now you gotta admit, this is a pretty novel idea for a puzzle game, but can I just say, how was anyone supposed to figure this out? It took me over half hour just to figure out I can make holes in the subway. Imagine how long it'd take a kid or an inexperienced gamer, if they'd ever even find it. This game gives you zero hints on what you're supposed to do, and that's infuriating. And this lack of direction is what completely destroys A Boy and His Blob. People can argue that, oh, it was part of the game's charm, you gotta use your imagination. But come on, this results in a game that is the very definition of trial and error. Imagine you're playing Legend of Zelda and the old dude that helps you out just doesn't exist. You get no help and you just gotta figure out things on your own. It's not gonna feel redeeming when you actually beat something, it's gonna make the whole game feel like a stupid guessing game. Oh, you really know you're having a good time when the game forces you to put random holes in the ground to find out where to go next. Uh-oh. And of course, how could I forget about the falling damage? Now usually in puzzle games, I have no problems with falling damage. I mean, it gives some realism to the character and, you know, keeps you in line with the laws of gravity. But I have problems when I have to toss a kid off a cliff all over a map just to find a landing spot. Throw in the fact you only have 5 lives as well as a limited supply of jelly beans, and you got yourself a disaster of a puzzle game.
So at this point I was thinking, how could this game get any worse? Well, what topped it off for me was the controls. You see, when you move your character and let go of the D-pad, he likes to jump and move forward for a second. Because of this, I died a lot going over ledges because the dude just didn't want to stop. And half the time I can't see ledges coming anyway because the screen doesn't scroll. It's screen by screen. Another extremely lazy design choice taken right out of Atari game design. But it's okay. Sometimes you'll live. Because of this. No.
But the funny thing is that the kid isn't the worst thing to control, the blob is. You see, A Boy and His Blob is one of the first games to have a partner AI. If you throw a jelly bean, he smiles and eats it. If you miss his mouth, he gets all sad. Yeah, I know, man, I'm not having a good time either. And when you move around the map, the blob will do his best to follow you. Emphasis on does his best. But as cool as this mechanic sounds, you'll lose track of the blob very easily, and it takes a while for him to come back. And sometimes he just won't come back at all, and then you gotta use one of your very limited uses of the ketchup jelly bean, which respawns him when you throw it. Fun fact, David Crane was actually forced by Nintendo to put this jelly bean in, since they saw the blob getting stuck as a bug, and I'm glad they did. I'll be honest, as cute as he is, this blob is downright stupid and likes to take a few seconds to ponder about following you. Seriously, what is it with games these days and poor partner AI?
But the interesting thing is, once you get through all the nonsense and get used to the game, your opinion of it does a complete 180 on you. All that hatred that builds inside you playing it turns into motivation to try to figure it out. And I'll admit, this is something that's never happened to me in a game before. So, without further ado, let me find the marker. Let's get to the review and I'll show you what I mean.
Now first up is fun. At the beginning of A Boy and His Blob, you will have absolutely no fun with this game. There's ridiculous trial and error, bad blob AI, laughable controls for the kid, and not a single freaking hint. But once you get past all that, you'll understand why this game was so well received. The secret of the game is to take different paths every time you start. In each screen you're supposed to map out where everything is, and once you have a good majority of the map completed, you'll get very close to beating the game. Each game over is supposed to reinforce the puzzles and immerse you in the game's open world, and once you know what you're doing, you can beat the game in under 20 minutes. Can't believe I'm saying this, but it's one of gaming's most rewarding experiences. The endgame is something that shocked me too. It's actually kinda cool. Once you buy enough vitamins for your Vita Blaster, yeah, nice use of vitamins by the way, you can plow down enemies with your daily supplements Contra style. Not to mention you're not just underground anymore, you're on planet Blablona, blah 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 blah. Forget it. And there's an actual overworld level to explore. But can I just say, why couldn't more of the game be like this? I would have been perfectly content if the game was split into, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 stages, with half of them being exploration and the other half with the Vita Blaster? Making the game more streamlined would have relieved a lot of the frustration and trial and error. Or maybe, you know, if they added hints. To summarize, A Boy and His Blob is only rewarding once you know what you're doing. But even then, using the word fun is really pushing it. Check minus. Second up is looks, and I don't know about this one. I understand that it's Crane's first NES game, but dude, do you know you can take advantage of the system, right? This looks almost as bad as an Atari 5200 game. Bland backgrounds, bland enemies, and that evil emperor, seriously. Just look at that evil emperor! No! This isn't 1982 anymore, man. The only thing saving this game from an X is that the blob and boy are well animated. That's it. Check minus. Third up is sound, and I actually have mixed feelings about this one. The bad thing is there's only 4 songs, actually not even, 2 songs with 2 remixes in the entire game. They also sound really sucky on the NES hardware, but the good thing is they're kinda catchy. I just wish they didn't loop to the very beginning half the time you use a jelly bean. That gets annoying fast. So this gets a check minus as well. And fourth up is length. As I said before, this game can be beaten in under 20 minutes once you figure it out, but there was so much trial and error that artificially lengthened the game. It was very satisfying once I figured it out, but over 20 years later, there is absolutely no reason to put up with this frustration. X. As for my final thoughts on the game, well, it sucks. I can totally understand why this game was so popular back in the 80s. It tried to innovate in the puzzle genre and show new ways to explore a world map, but these days this game is literally a chore to play. Now that I think about it, this game actually reminds me of doing laundry. You're gonna hate doing it at first, but once you come across spots in the clothes, it's going to bother you and you're gonna keep trying to do different things to get that stupid grease stain off your shirt. So to me, A Boy and His Blob can be very rewarding, but it never comes close to being fun. So with that, A Boy and His Blob barely gets a check minus for me.
Don't play this game, and definitely don't buy it. I don't know, I just can't recommend the game to anyone, unless you're some sort of NES treasure hunter who needs to find a lost, hidden artifact in the NES library. In that case, it's $5. But either way, I don't really regret playing this game, because we all learned something from it.
Each game has a story to tell, through their development, their design, the impact it made on the gaming industry. And if you start to piece these games together, you start to realize that they're all connected in some way, like a huge puzzle. And that's really my goal. I want to open the eyes of gamers all over the world. I don't just want my review to focus on a single game, I want us to learn everything this industry has to offer and continue our ultimate quest to understanding video games as a whole. And what better way to do that than using the tools I know best, Nintendo consoles. So welcome to a place where anything is possible within the boundaries of a blue lunchbox, upper arm strength, or even a controller built for someone with 3 hands. Welcome to a place where we go into the depths of gaming to uncover the truth. Welcome, my friends, to my Nintendo game room. See you next time.
I mean, I love that game. I have it on my iPod. Of course it flips.